Okay, good morning. We'll call to order the April 22nd meeting of the Region 6 Go Virginia Regional Council. First order of business is Sarah, would you conduct a roll call, please?
Yes. Dr. Derek Aday. John Anzavino.
Present.
William Beal.
Present.
Taryn Bryce Rowland. Renee Daniels. Jackie Davis. Jan Urquhart. Val Folds.
Present.
Joel Griffin.
Here.
Lisa Hull.
Present.
Dr. Shannon Kennedy.
I'm here.
Kim McClellan.
Here.
Rob Cortell.
Here.
Jeff Sabursky.
Here.
Lindsay Watson. Linda Worrell. Kimberly Young.
I am present and officially Dr. Kimberly Young.
Dr. Kimberly, that's right. Congratulations, doctor. I will update our system for that for sure.
Thank you
Congratulations.
so much.
All right. And that is a quorum.
Okay, well, thank you for ascertaining that. Introductions, I'd like to welcome all of our guests today. That they include the folks from Erin Kohler and April Morgan from RCC and GCC, who are going to give us an update on the patient care technician report. I see Billy is on the phone, is on the call as well, Billy Gamble. And of course, we'll be joined by our folks who are doing a presentation this morning, Dr. Rebecca Lowry. Are there any citizens or public comments or any individuals from the public who wish to be heard at this meeting of the Go Virginia Region 6 Council?
We did not have any submitted, and I do not see anyone in the chat.
All right. Next item of business is the consent agenda. You've had in your packet, as presented by Sarah and Ian, the January 22nd, 2024 minutes. Are there any additions or corrections?
Move approval, John.
And who is that, Jeff?
Jeff, yep.
Yep, Jeff Sapersky has moved approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
And who is that second from, please?
Rob.
Okay, Rob, thank you very much. Any discussion? Okay, we'll call for the question. All those in favor of approving the January 22nd, 2024 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, well, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda are presentations. The first is Department of Housing and Community Development. Now, will this be Sarah or will this be Billy?
It'll be Sarah.
Okay, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, and we look forward to your presentation about J. Larkin State Board updates.
That's great. And I wasn't sure, Sarah, if you were going to share the slides that we sent over, if I need to pull those up, I apologize.
No, that's fine. I was trying to make you a co-host, but it is not allowing me.
Okay.
So I'll pull up the slides, and then if you just want to say next slide, I'll go to the next one. So let me grab those up for you.
Okay, I appreciate you. And I especially appreciate you all giving me a little bit of time on the agenda. We have been really trying to work closely with our regional councils. I've got my team really fanned out across the state over the next week or two, so that we can be there. And we do have some key messages that we want to make sure all the regional councils are aware of. So those are some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. But I'd also like to do just one more thing, and that is just reorient or ground everyone in Go Virginia's project development framework. I know it can be as council members, and I've sat in your seat. I've been a volunteer asked to serve on behalf of a local or regional initiative. And if you're relatively new, or even if you've been on the council for a while, I think it is a good idea to really get grounded on what the program is really designed to help Region 6 accomplish. So next slide. Go Virginia at its core, you guys, this is a regionally driven economic development initiative. It was designed to give a large amount of regional autonomy to regions like 6. There's 9 regions across the state, but primarily to encourage and incentivize collaboration between multiple partners, and that includes your local governments, higher education, private industry, workforce, just to name a few. And you all have brought together, I think, some really exciting partnerships to support projects that are ongoing and forthcoming in your region. Traded industry clusters is a special definition. And traded industry clusters have a characteristic that is important for Go Virginia, and they tend to pay higher than average jobs. They are, most importantly, economically important to your region, okay? This tends to be where, next slide, please. There's more value added in our manufacturing processes, for example. There tends to be more innovation, meaning new ideas are formed there, which add value. And this is just simply a definition of traded clusters, which is a concept that's taught in economics class and not much where else. But these are typically regarded as the engines of regional economies. Firms in traded industry clusters, they serve markets in other regions or across the nation. And just to contrast that with local clusters, they sell products and services primarily for your local market. Some examples there are drugstores, physician offices, elementary schools, radio networks. We could kind of go on and on. The traded industries in your growth and diversification plan are very dynamic and diverse, and include certainly information technology, aquaculture is named in your plan, manufacturing similarly is named in your plan, and those have been recognized by you as key drivers of the Region 6 economy. Next slide, please. This is just a bit more about them. I mentioned they tend to pay higher wages and also provide more opportunities for advancement for individuals that get into those particular industries. And just notable local clusters, a good way to remember it is employment is typically proportional to the population of the region. Next slide. We'll go ahead and skip here, but traded clusters also enhance productivity. It's a regional concentration of related industries. So think about it as a whole supply chain, if you will, for an industry like aquaculture that would include not just harvesting of fish or aquatic animals, but also value-added processing, shipping, new product development, marketing, logistics, all to support that industry. And manufacturing is an example, something that works the same way. Of course, that's a product, but in areas like information technology, it's really significant because you grow larger pools of specialized talent, and there tends to be a lot of idea exchange. Next slide. Your G&D plan, which just as a reminder for members of the Regional Council, is going to be coming up for review again. I think it's important to remember as a council member, that is the playbook for Region 6 as it's looking at investments with its per capita allocation, or if it'd like to pursue a more ambitious project and access the statewide competitive fund. It includes a situational analysis of each of those industries, an understanding of the talent pipeline, and you guys just had delivered, I think, a very interesting talent pathway report that should be instructive and help you understand where to make future investments to strengthen the skills development system. That's big S in Region 6. It identifies very specifically certain investment strategies, and I was looking at your plan last week, and there's a number of actionable strategies. It actually names partners, folks that would collaborate around one or more of those strategies, and also demonstrates measures of success. And I think for members of regional councils, knowing what it's looks like when you're winning is really, really important and something that should motivate everybody moving forward. Next slide. Just to restate, these are the ones that I reviewed and read in your plan: aquaculture, seafood, commercial fishing, marine industries, distribution, logistics. I think you've got some definite competitive advantage here. Forestry, wood products, paper. There's definitely a degree of specialization going on in Region 6 that could be capitalized. Manufacturing, particular in the middle and the southern portion of Region 6, but there's some strong capabilities in the northern part as well. Professional, scientific, technical services, and information and data centers. So these are those things that should be tattooed on the inside of your eyeballs as members of the regional council. And when you're out meeting with business leaders or local government leaders, or just folks who care about things that you care about, meaning economic growth. Growth can be neutral, but certainly sufficient to maintain and enhance the quality of life in Region 6. Next slide. There are 4 investment strategies that the Go Virginia State Board has endorsed. You can see them on your slide. Talent development, the simplest way to describe this is, let's see if we can grow a larger pool of qualified talent, better align our existing workforce development systems so that they perhaps better serve industry, but I believe strongly that they also better serve students when they're providing an opportunity to develop skills that have value in the marketplace. The second big strategy is entrepreneurship and innovation. And again, most new jobs created in the economy, and this is especially true in rural areas, come from entrepreneurs. And also a significant driver is new ideas coming out of existing businesses. But companies in those categories, they need a resource-rich environment to make them successful. The third strategy is cluster scale up. And that can be a bit confusing, but I like to think of it in 2 different ways. Are there new or emerging opportunities that a region can take advantage of? And I use an example from Region 5 that you may be familiar with, but offshore wind, right? The offshore wind industry, which wasn't an industry at all until we had some folks say, hey, let's put some turbines out there in the ocean and see what we can build. They've been very active in trying to scale up that industry cluster. We would call that emerging. The next example is what I would call a pivot strategy. How do you take firms in an existing industry and help them pivot to a new market opportunity? And that could be a group of manufacturers. For example, we see that in Southwest Virginia, where they're trying to diversify by shifting some of their production manufacturing capacity over to something that is not coal extraction, right? And that's just been a transition for Southwest Virginia. But those companies have some processes and a workforce that has value to other markets. And then finally, business-ready sites and infrastructure. And I know this was a stated priority in your growth and diversification plan, and I think an area where there are some really big opportunities for Region 6. Because let's face it, you've got a couple things going for you in the western part of the region. Of course, you've got a major interstate north-south, and you have available land that some of your more urbanized neighbors don't. And I think that continues all the way up into the Fredericksburg region. Companies are looking for business-ready sites, meaning they want sites that someone has control, that there's been some level of preparedness. Some of the big questions have been answered with those sites, and the infrastructure is available or could be made available in pretty short order so that they can start up operations. In my 25-year history or career in economic development, companies don't want to wait. They really want a business-ready site. And so any risk that a region like 6 can take out of that decision-making process will really, I think, play to your advantage. Next slide. But these things don't exist in isolation. They are all part of a broader project development framework. So if you think about an industry target in the center, what you're really trying to do is build an ecosystem of resources to help it grow. Multiple strategies, if you will. So pick an industry. You can go to the next slide, Sarah. And this is just illustrative of manufacturing. You can put any of your targeted industries in the middle here. And you see around the wheel a series of questions. So you as regional council leaders and community leaders, when you're thinking about talent for manufacturing, the questions you should be asking are, what are the workforce needs? What are our workforce training system assets? Where are the gaps? And how could we strengthen it? And we do hope that the Talent Pathways project that you recently completed is answering those questions. If you want to think about planning grants, the planning grants are opportunities for Go Virginia Region 6 to get those questions answered. The projects exist inside the pie slices, if you will. That's where your strategies actually become implemented. And so you can peruse this later, but again, sites. What are the sites and space needs of this industry? So always consider an application in the context of one or more industries. Manufacturing and logistics share many similar characteristics, but not all. And so really answering these questions is important as you work to execute your site strategy. Startup, and you've had a lot of really interesting and I think successful projects in the startup space. But again, the lens you're looking through for project development for Go Virginia is this industry sector lens. Next slide, please. I've just listed on these slides, and you can look at them later, just some examples of projects you funded to support manufacturing in this region. The first was the Northern Neck Workforce Training Feasibility Study, and that was one of your community college partners really trying to understand what training programs and where they should be offered within the region, proximate to employment centers, proximate to population centers. The welding training program and a subsequent extension. Internships Expo is designed as well to provide young students more exposure to careers in manufacturing. Pathways to Success is using your growth and diversification plan, again, to develop career exploration opportunities for students so that they can become more familiar with, and this is the big thing for young people. They don't know about what they don't know about, right? So we can't expect them to pursue a career in the skilled trades, information technology, aquaculture, anything in between until they get some exposure. The Germanna Tech Talent Pipeline, Workforce Now, the Rappahannock Community College New Career Training Center. That was a recent project. There's a welding component there, I believe. And then finally, Talent Pathways Planning, which was a second planning grant, was designed specifically to illuminate what the needs are in what the skills development needs are to support manufacturing. Next slide. For Scale Up, there are a number of projects underway or completed. The first is the commercial kitchen at Hull Springs. There was a feasibility study. Remember, food manufacturing is manufacturing, right? And the art of growing a crop is one thing. Actually processing it and taking it directly to consumer does something interesting. It adds value to the production process and brings new resources into the region because that grower, for example, can access a larger market. The Fredericksburg Regional Industry Cluster Analysis, that was really a look at existing and emerging industries. That was for the northern part of the Region 6 to understand their niches as it relates to manufacturing. All right, next slide. Startup strategy, again, commercial kitchen at Hull Springs. There was a feasibility study done. Riot is a program that has certainly oriented to do more outreach with area manufacturers. And your regional entrepreneurship investment strategy, which is currently underway, the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance is kind of point on the spear for that initiative, is going to be looking at manufacturing and what type of resources early stage, high growth potential companies need to be successful in Region 6. And manufacturing was selected specifically in the Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck. Next slide. As it relates to sites for manufacturing, okay, there's been 4 projects that have been funded. The most recent is the West Point Airport Industrial Site Evaluation. But there have been, as you see noted above, a couple of different projects that have been done. I read your growth and diversification plan. And I understand, based on your review and assessment, this is an area of opportunity for the broader Go Virginia Region 6. Having product is important if you have an interest in attracting new industry. It doesn't have to be a mega site. I know there's a lot of talk about mega sites. What I think is more important is that regions identify sites that are appropriately sized and positioned to appeal to, in this example, manufacturers, right? So don't worry if you don't have a 1,000-acre site. There's actually very few requests in the world for 1,000-acre sites. The sweet spot, as I understand it from our friends at VEDP, is really 25 to 75 acres. And I think I'm probably saying right when that represents probably more than 75% of all of the site location assistance requests for the state. Next slide. I want to bring forward just a couple program and policy updates. I know there's been some questions about the JLARC study recommendations, and thanks to all of you who were able to participate in either an interview or responded to a survey from our friends at JLARC. I think they did a very fair job with their evaluation. They came up with 16 recommendations. Those are all being reviewed, okay? There's been an agency review and response, and the board has created a couple of new committees to basically parse out and divide all 16 recommendations to look at the justification for the recommendation, any data that can support the recommendation, and to make a decision if the board or the agency, whoever has the appropriate authority, wants to move forward with the recommendation. Specifically, the Governance and Policy Committee, and then the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee. Those were the 2 committees that had been formed the meeting before the release of the JLARC study, and it just worked perfectly to divide those recommendations between those 2 committees. And we've already cleared the deck on probably about 6 of those, meaning we have already implemented those recommendations or they have been reviewed and referred. 2 of those were actually policy recommendations that would require legislation. I'm going to give you an exciting update on those at the end of my presentation. There is a new state board officer position that was created. It's the vice chair for regional councils. This chairmanship, if you will, vice chairmanship, and what will be a committee is going to be really the linkage that I think that you will value between the regional council leadership and the state board. So we expect that that officer will be elected at the June meeting, and a committee will be formed, and we will include members from urban areas and rural areas because we think those are 2 very important perspectives. And so we're going to be doing some outreach and supporting that committee in their work to be a liaison to all of you. We have expanded access to the statewide competitive fund for regions that were felt banded a bit by their annual per capita allocation. We have created a path forward if you have a highly impactful project that meets certain criteria. You can blow past your own per capita fund balance and do larger projects. And I know a lot of folks are excited about that, and I think there may be one in development in your region as well. Healthcare industry investment, that is coming. There was a task force planned last September. And interestingly enough, this was also a recommendation from the JLARC study, which would allow the expansion of workforce development capacity if the region can demonstrate that a lack of healthcare services is limiting the growth and diversification of the regional economy, meaning it's affecting the region's ability to grow its targeted traded sector industries. And so we are really excited about this. We've held a number of input sessions that the support organizations have been attending on your behalf, just to make sure when this policy rolls out that it's going to be simple, and will indeed increase the pool of qualified workers for the healthcare industry. Next slide. All right, and these are some policy updates. I mentioned there were 2 recommendations in the JLARC study that would have required legislation. And in fact, that moved forward. New program match requirements beginning fiscal year 25. It relaxes the total match requirements to 2-to-1. So the original enabling legislation said, if you guys and gals, as regions organize $1 to support a regional initiative, the state will complement that with another $1. What the relaxed match allows is, as you can organize $1 to support a regional initiative, the state will support that with $2. So that was the posture during the pandemic. Everybody seemed to be very enthusiastic about that. So that will go into effect on July 1. And the second is new board member options for the governor. There has been a 4th cabinet member added from a list of options. The Secretary of Labor, which was a secretariat that did not exist when the enabling legislation for Go Virginia was passed, is now an option. So the governor will have the authority beginning July 1 to appoint the Secretary of Labor. Currently, we have the Secretary of Commerce and Trade and the Secretary of Finance. There are 2 other cabinet level appointment options available to the governor, and that is the Secretary of Education and also the Secretary of Agriculture. The third update for you is pending state budget approval. It was included in the governor's introduced budget. It would revert 28 million of unobligated funds to the Virginia Treasury. That will take effect on June 30th. And so we are monitoring that. The good news is our state base level funding is steady at 30 million. And so we expect pending state budget that those resources will be available. And then there's also some mention in the budget, this is state budget language, so of course not signed yet by the governor, that there will be some public facing project performance dashboard. Okay, so currently we do report quarterly to legislative services, principally the House and Senate Money Committee staff, on project outcomes that are and expenditures that are committed versus those that are achieved. And so we will be working with stakeholders to consider some design for a performance dashboard, and we will have regional views. I can promise you that. So you as council members will be able to look at, for example, just the Region 6 projects and their performance relative to other regions and relative to the program performance as a whole. I do want to go back to point 3 for folks that may be concerned. This is only for unobligated fund balances. So any projects that are under contract will not be affected by this $28 million reversion. And then we've got some meeting dates coming up. So I'll stop there and answer questions.
Any questions for Sarah? Any comments from the board members?
Yeah, Sarah, unobligated as of when?
June 30th.
June 30th of 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So that would cover all our projects that are on the agenda today, Ian, as we push them up to the state board. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It would. And
Okay.
Sarah, I know you guys are kind of working through this, but could you, and as the support orgs, we've, been a part of these conversations, but just for the benefit of the council, can you kind of talk about, like, theoretically how you guys envision getting to that 28 million, especially if a lot of the regions spend down most of their money before June 30th?
Yeah, so we've done this before, unfortunately. So we've got some experience. We do not have enough statewide competitive money to cover the 28 million out of those funds. We're looking at scenarios. So we're, interestingly enough, expecting $21 million worth of applications at the June meeting, which would be completely unprecedented. And I understand why, right? So there's been a lot of projects that have been in the pipeline at various stages of development. So we're looking at two different scenarios, and I should be able to share more next week. One of which would highly impact the statewide competitive fund, really push the majority of the burden of the recapture onto the statewide competitive fund, and then share the remainder of the burden, distributing it based on what percentage each region represents for unobligated fund balances, if that makes sense. So we'll look at all unobligated fund balances, and if a region represents 10% of that, whatever we need to recapture to make up the balance that can't be covered by the statewide competitive fund, that is one scenario. The other one is probably a little more full distribution, meaning we'll look at the fund balances for all the per capita funds and the statewide competitive fund, calculate what they represent of the total unobligated fund balance, and then just run that scenario against the $28 million recapture.
Additional questions,
Hey, Sarah,
comments
this
from the
is,
board?
yeah, Sarah, this is Jeff Sapersky. Just a little clarification on the new regional liaison.
Uh-huh.
Like how do you all envision that working? How is it just not another layer between the regional boards and the state boards? How will it facilitate? What's the need that it's trying to serve? Does that make sense?
So I think what we heard, and staff has been really trying to support through annual retreats and various other means to make sure that the leadership at the regional councils is connected to the state board. And this was, in the early days of the program, very intentional. I mean, in many ways, the members of the state board recruited the regional council leadership. So there was a little bit of I think more of a sense of unity or a common sense of purpose. And we'd like to try to reinstill some of that. But I think also most importantly is the state board received a letter from all of you after the JLARC study. And I think we've heard repeatedly that the regional council would like some more opportunities to dialogue directly with the state board and make sure that there is a two-way dialogue. So there will be a vice chair for regional councils. There has been a candidate recommended. But again, that person has not been elected to that post. I think there's going to be a small committee, Jeff, and I think that committee is going to reach out to the council leadership and say, what do we need to do together to move this program and these efforts forward? So I think that will inform future work. This will be staff supported, really led by a group of board members.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any additional questions or comments from the board members? Well, Sarah,
I've got one, John. Sarah,
Okay, Billy.
is the JLARC report public?
Of course, yes, sir. Yep, you
Okay,
can get
so I
right on
can-
the jail.
Okay,
Billy, I'll send it to you.
all right.
We'll send it out to everybody again.
Yeah, I'd like to see what kind of went through because well, I only know how I answered questions, so I wanted to see whether that was other things were included in there about some of the operational inefficiency and those types of things that we have. And I do think it would make a difference to get to get some more input or involvement from the regional councils. I'm not sure a liaison solves that issue. But anyway, thank you, Ian.
Sarah, question for you, John Enzavino here. In January, we heard at the Go Virginia board retreat from Jason Alcubi that they're kind of retooling the focus of economic development here in the state. We know there's a lot of refocusing on and consolidation of workforce training efforts, those types of things. How do the regional councils fit into that, and how how much is that kept in the minds of the VEDP folks? Because there always seems to be a breakdown in communication between different levels of government and different organizations in government. So how, is that being kept out in front?
Yes, so we as an agency and Go Virginia specifically have been very involved in the development of the Innovative Growth Framework, which is the new strategy, if you will, Virginia's embracing. I think what's important and I think very interesting, an opportunity for you is it is really a much more holistic approach to economic development than many of us have probably seen in a long time. And indeed, many of the resources and investments you have made are there to support regional talent development systems, correct? So we have been working very closely with VEDP on a number of fronts. You will notice that, for example, all of the match waiver processes that are in place right now are guided, if you will, by the Innovative Growth Framework. In other words, we're trying to incentivize through reduced match investments in those three industry verticals that are in the Innovative Growth Framework. Not to say they can't be in other areas, but really asking regions to consider prioritizing those. And not because VDP says it's a good idea, right? It's where the data is pointing and telling us that that is where the majority of the economic expansion activity is going to occur. So it's kind of like, let's hitch our wagons right to the fastest moving vehicle. But that is one example. Another example is with our outcomes report. So the new labor secretary and I have a lot of conversations, and they are working on some new metrics for the workforce system. Right, that's part of the new agency consolidation. Go Virginia was already reporting results as it related to its talent development initiatives. So we've recently aligned our outcome measures and definitions to conform to the new workforce agencies, right? So this whole idea of link, leverage, align is something that we're being tasked to do. Now, I do know VDP has hired what should be of great value to you, and that's a lot of these new sector leads. These are folks with deep industry experience. And I think it should be a resource to you as you're saying, hey, what does a region like 6 do if we want to grow the logistics industry? And in fact, I think their logistics sector lead is really one of the best I've met. So I think that that's something, important to consider. But again, this is still, I call it a choose your own adventure program, which is to say, I do want Region 6 to stay true to the things that make you unique and where you have a unique competitive advantage. The 3 primary targets, that's kind of 3 that were picked because there was universal appeal. You've got some niches that I think you could really nurture. And we want to make sure Go Virginia is there to help you do that.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from board members?
I have a question if nobody else on the council has a question.
Go ahead, Ian.
Sarah, can you kind of talk about, as we're transitioning into Go Virginia 2.0, what it looks like? And I know one of the JLARC recommendations was for there to be less of just an emphasis on high-paying job creation as an analysis for whether a project is viable. Can you kind of talk about what that conversation has been like and in trying to consider applications more holistically?
So the first thing I want to do is just a little bit of myth busting. High paying jobs is a characteristic of traded sector industries. Okay. So it is a descriptor. Once you identify your traded sector industries, and I think agriculture is a great example, it may not have the highest paying job, but it is economically significant for Region 6. So we hope that Go Virginia, and we hope that Region 6 also aspires to create good paying jobs for residents through these types of efforts, but it is not it is not an eligibility criteria. I think the more meaningful conversation for all of us is really around return on investment. And return on investment, I think, has also been misunderstood as an eligibility criteria, meaning that you have to have a positive return to the Commonwealth. And really that calculator is just a fiscal return to the Commonwealth during the grant period. And that is not true. Okay, so it is an evaluation criteria. I do believe projects that can provide evidence of some positive return in the first 3 to 5 years are viewed more favorably. And I'm sure if it was your investment, you'd have similar feelings about that. But it is not an evaluation criteria, nor is high wage jobs. High wage jobs is a characteristic of a type of industry. I could say manufacturing has higher paying jobs than food service. Okay. And so it really is, and I see Dr. Gullickson kind of nodding and smiling. I do want to make sure that's clear to everyone. It is a descriptor or a characteristic of firms in traded sector industry clusters.
Okay,
And I think the ROI, the return on investment, is going to be something that is picked up by one or both of these committees. I like to think about Go Virginia as more transformational than transactional. And so what we're trying to do is build new capacity as you select within your regions, that if designed correctly, it's going to continue to produce results even after the grant funds are no longer available because of your sustainability strategies, right? So I think those sustainability balanced with ROI is probably something that you as council members need to be considering. I think if it's should not be, but if there isn't a very good sustainability strategy, then as an investor, I would be looking for some returns, right? While my money's in the deal. If it looks like that the applicant definitely has a strong sustainability strategy, I could be a more patient investor, if that makes sense.
all right, Sarah, thank you so much for your patience in answering our questions and your excellent presentation. We look forward to continuing to work with you and moving the region forward. Let's move on to our next item on the agenda, which, Ian, you wanted to brief the council and make them aware of our obligations as public officials under the Freedom of Information Act.
Sure. So we'll actually, if it's okay with you, we'll bump up Ellen's presentation.
Okay.
Let Sarah run that from her computer, and then I'm just going to share a short video. It does a really good job. It's from Albemarle County of just kind of giving an overview of FOIA and the obligations that folks have when serving on a public body. So we'll let the Germanna RCC teams take it over.
Okay, Ellen Kohler and April Morgan, welcome, and we look forward to this presentation. This is a real need in our area, so we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, good morning, everybody. On behalf of Dr. Morgan and myself, we have worked together for the past year on this patient care tech program, about a year. And we're here today to report some of our outcomes. We aren't finished with gathering all of our data, but we have some great news. If you'll go to the next slide, I'll say that the names on the front sheet of this are different than when we first started, because Dr. Morgan and I both replaced retiring deans. So I'll just take you back a little bit to what the Go Virginia grant was doing for us. It was an idea of our predecessors to combine two relatively lower paying credentials into one, which was the nurse aide plus the medical assistant, and hopefully give our residents that complete this program an opportunity to work in a wider variety of settings. That includes long-term care, acute care settings, and doctor's offices. So we also hope to offset some of those nursing positions that were vacated during COVID. And, you know, our acute care facilities are looking more towards a team model again, which has been around long as I have in the nursing profession. That was an old model previously of caring for patients in the hospital, and we got away from that for a little while, but COVID has taken us back to that. We're also helping to increase the successful outcomes of the AHEC Center, which we both are members of, the Rappahannock Area Health Education Center. Next slide. So what this grant has done for us has expanded our programs. RCC specifically only had a nurse aid curriculum. Now we have the combo. It definitely increased job opportunities for our graduates of this program, are able to go in various places having these double credentials. It increased the salaries beyond the nurse aid, which working in acute care settings does for most to have that credential. And then we have set up our graduates of this program to have 2 credentials, leaving a 12-week program. Next slide. So these are the metrics that we set out when we first launched this program. Our goal was 120 students admitted and trained in the period, and we actually had 104. 110 that would have completed the coursework, and we had 94. We said 85% of the credentials as CMA and CMA, and those are still pending. The pass rate today are 62 CMAs and 42 NAs. And I can tell you that some of that low number for the NA is CNAs because the physical skills testing is so unique based off the Board of Nursing requirements. So I'll just add that piece to that. A lot of our graduates also, this is a little side note, a lot of our graduates, as long as they have the certificate from one of our colleges, they can usually get employed without the credential passing the state board or the CMA test. And then for the best news, one of our outcomes was 50% placed in jobs 3 months after being credentialed or finishing our program, and to date we are at 64% of that. So we're really excited. We're still gathering data. As of Friday, we still had 3 more pass exams, so our statistics are constantly changing because we were able to complete 4 cohorts instead of 3, which was originally our intent. We were able to squeeze in another cohort. Next slide. The big win for our community is that of the 64% of the students have reported job placement very quickly after completing our program. A lot of our local patient care tech was a term not really used widely. And so some of our local hospitals were able to reinvent a job description that matched this and was catching up to the talk and the positions that we just weren't all using the same language. All the hospitals were not using the same language when they talked about patient care tech. So we've had a couple of facilities change language to meet the outcomes of this curriculum. And then we've also talked about, or RCC is continuing this program now that we've completed this grant period. We're completing it as is, patient care tech, nurse aid, and MA. And both of us, Germanna and I, both talked to the high schools about doing this as well, to get the high school students set up in the same way, having double credentials. So Dr. Morgan, was there anything else that we wanted to add to this? Because I'm at the.
I do. We found at Germanna that our students liked having the separate credentials. They were not as appreciative of being in the course for the 12 weeks and having to do both. We had a lot of students that wanted the CMA program separately. So we have decided to keep them separate, but to keep the short time frame. So in 12 weeks, they can still complete both credentials, 12 to 14 weeks. However, we're keeping it separate because that's what our population has been asking for. And they can get their credentials in the same time frame and still have the opportunity of the jobs that are out there. And what we have found is that our high schools are very interested in this program. So we are thinking about moving this program into our high schools so that our high school students can do the dual credentials within their academic year. So we found that it best fits in that arena. So we're having those conversations now.
Excellent. Next slide, I think is our last slide. So the lessons that we've learned out of this, on-site testing for nurse aid has better outcomes, and RCC is going to be returning to being a site test. So we can take advantage of that on-site testing that comes from the Board of Nursing. The PCT curriculum evolved through the grant cycle, meaning we altered the curriculum, I think, twice after the first go. We were just trying to meet the needs of the students, meet the needs of the outcomes of both medical assistant and nurse aid, and try to make sense of, combining two curriculums into one. We also did learn that we can teach the nursing assistant and the medical assistant didactic portion totally online, which is what we did because we were sharing faculty and working across the two campuses. We still bring them in for lab and of course clinical, but that definitely helps the working student that can attend class in the evenings because they're working during the day and then just have one day a week that they're coming in for clinical or lab. We also found a really strong collaboration between existing resources and making great partnerships. Germanna had an existing MA curriculum and a strong nurse aid faculty, and RCC had a large pipeline of students ready to enroll. The collaboration was very beneficial to both of us, and it was a lot of work on a lot of us, and we found a really nice way to meet regularly and iron all of the behind the scenes kinks out. It worked out very nicely for us. RCC is now trying to, we had a lot of nursing assistants that were interested in this curriculum, but we couldn't, without putting them in a whole 12-week curriculum, we couldn't figure that out. So we're trying now to create maybe a bridge program into the MA portion. But anyway, we're continuing to do this curriculum at our college and then speak to our high schools as April talked about. And we're really set up very nicely to continue the curriculum because of this grant. That completes our presentation. If there are any questions, I see there is. Yes, Sarah.
Questions from the board? Anyone?
Sarah had her hand up, I believe. Yes.
Sarah?
That's appropriate, sir. I don't want to interrupt your meeting, but I'm always fascinated to see how these economic resilience and recovery projects are finishing. Of course, these resources were special, extended to regions to help mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic, right? So I really enjoyed your presentation. I think what was interesting was the level of industry support, and I haven't heard you mention any of the folks who provided the testimony, if you will, for the demand for PCTs. So that included Bon Secours, University of Mary Washington Health System, VCU Health, Tappahannock, Bay Aging, Spotsylvania, Regional Medical Center. So could you maybe, you've talked a lot about student demand, but employer demand, how has your outreach to those employers been enhanced or continued through these resources?
I can speak for our partnership with Mary Washington Hospital. Many of our students had their clinical at Mary Washington Hospital, and many were hired there. There were some students that were hired at our Spotsylvania Regional Hospital, and that relationship has strengthened through this endeavor as well. So that was one relationship that we were able to strengthen through this project. And then, of course, our Mary Washington relationship was one that sparked interest in this project. And so that was continued through this.
Yeah, much of our relationships were already strong, but I can tell you, I think I skipped over one win for the college, for the colleges, that our local VCU Tappahannock, I think, was one of the ones you had listed. They have hired several of our PCT, as well as Riverside, Walter Reed hired like 6 all in 1 month. And what's really interesting is now a lot of those students that were hired, that a lot of those PCT students that were hired are now have been accepted into our nursing program. So they have the opportunity to work while they're in our nursing programs. So it just gave them a huge leg up in, being in front of patients in clinical. And so our the VCU Tappahannock was the one that wrote the new patient care tech job description just for this, for the outcomes of this project.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Ellen, April, thank you very much for your report, the success that you've had, and how it's impacting the region. That's real positive in the area of healthcare, because there's a real need in that area. So thank you, and we'll move on to our next agenda item, which will be nominating committee report from Kim McClellan. Ian, we'll defer this FOI training until the end of the meeting, if that's okay with you. Okay.
Perfectly fine.
Okay. So Kim, you have a nominating committee report.
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. Hi, I'm Kim McClellan, the chair of the nominating committee. We had a nominating committee meeting not long ago and are very happy to have a great slate of folks to re-elect. We are welcoming Jan Urquhart for a second term, and also Linda Worrell for a second term. Also bumping Jan up to the executive committee. And then having Dr. Gullickson, welcome. I see you on the call today, so nice to see you, to the council, and also bringing on Vernon Green, who is a past applicant and recipient of Go Virginia Funds. So very excited to have Vernon on the call as well. So I move that the nominating committee moves that we approve this slate of folks for today. Ian, did I get everything?
I think you did, yes.
You did.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from the nominating committee to elect the folks as noted on the agenda for the various terms, to the various committees, and to the regional council. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. Any questions, any additional discussion concerning the nominees and the report of the committee? Hearing none, let's call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, I think you've got enough there, Sarah, that we have a unanimous vote for the nominating committee's report, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. And Kim, thank you for the hard work on the nominating committee. Appreciate it. We're still trying to fill some positions, and we'll continue to work forward with that. All right, next item up is the budget for fiscal year 25. And Ian, you're going to give us a report on that, correct? And that is an action item. We'll need a motion to adopt, amend, or anything else that we want to do with it after Ian's report.
And the
We
next
will.
two action items will be roll call. But
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So, I'll try to get through this quickly because I know Rob has to jump off at 11:30, maybe some other folks want to get to the application, but so basically we had this conversation last year. I think in the past for Go Virginia, before my time, a budget was just presented at the 250,000. So that's what we're allocated every fiscal year for Go Virginia. For staffing, basically all the things that Sarah and I do to support the council and the work of Region 6. So on July 1st, we will get an additional tranche of $250,000 for capacity building. So what we have to do at a baseline level, or what the council has to do, is approve the DHCD template and the DHCD narrative, which give a detailed breakdown of how we're going to spend the $250,000 in fiscal year 25. So you can see the majority of our money goes to salaries, fringe, and indirect. You'll see a bit of an increase there, especially if you look at the third document that I included, which is a breakdown. So this one, it's not the most beautiful Excel you'll see in your life, but this is we carry over money every year. So we'll carry over about $98,645. So all the way in the left-hand column, that gives you kind of a breakdown of that total amount. So Sarah, we can go back to the narrative. But you will see an increase in the allocation that we have to salaries, and that is primarily because we are increasing Sarah's time for Go Virginia. So there was a little bit of Chip's time as the PDC director going towards Go Virginia in the past, a really small amount. Sarah previously, last year, the program coordinator position was budgeted about 70% of her time, so 70% Go Virginia, the rest was allocated to the PDC. For purposes outside of Go Virginia. So you'll see that bump up to about 87%. And then I'm still full-time Go Virginia. So that's the main change from last year. The other thing that I'll say, you'll see an increase in the meetings and workshops. So part of that is because we're doing the Regional Economic Development Summit that we did in January. So we've allocated, a somewhat significant portion of that. As a government entity, we try to not hold on to any money from that. So we try to use most of our budget to go towards that and rely less upon registration and sponsorship. The other thing that you'll see in the budget there for meetings and workshops, that includes our membership in professional development organizations. So Sarah and I are both members of the Virginia Economic Developers Association. We go to their meetings at least once a year. We're also members of the International Economic Development Council, which is kind of they house the Certified Economic Developers certification. So we're members of both of those organizations. And then I have in here budgeted specifically to be a part of the Virginia Rural Leadership Institute, which is put on every year. And then we also have some smaller events that we go to. And then everything else is really straightforward. Another thing that I'll point out, though, is that for travel, again, you'll get kind of a better picture of what that's going to look like over the course of this program year. If you look at the full budget. But one of the things when I came on board that you all tasked me with is getting out into the localities more and building relationships with folks. So that's a really significant part of what we do. So Sarah and I are starting to hold these application sessions, but we also try to go out and meet with the EDAs frequently, meet with our partners in the region, meet with private companies. We've done an aquaculture tour of companies. So getting input from kind of all the partners that we work with in all the localities. So that's something that we try to emphasize in the budget as well. You'll see this $41,150 and $80 for planning grants. That's just because that's how the DHCD has the line items, but that's what we're holding in contingency. So that's another thing I want to highlight. You know, I mentioned that we carry over money every year. When I first started, we were carrying over money from like 2 or 3 fiscal years back. We've gotten to the point where we're not doing that, but we're still carrying over a significant amount. So we try to always think strategically about how we can spend that money in a prudent way. So we try to do that this year, but we still have that balance of 41,000. So what I would be asking you guys to approve today is this budget narrative and the budget template from DHCD, which is again kind of our baseline requirement. And then what I'd also ask you to do is approve this third document, which again is a breakdown of our total budget, so the 250 and the carryover. And I've kind of broken it out in these two, the middle column and the far right column by grant year. That's what I did last year. That's kind of a best practice that we're carrying over. So you'll see 2024 grant year, that's just the carryover money. And then 2025 grant year is basically fiscal year 25. So happy to answer any questions you guys have, make any modifications. But, you know, again, just want to emphasize that most of our budget does go towards staffing, so salaries, fringe, and indirect.
Thank you, Ian. Prior to entertaining a motion to adopt these 3 documents, do we have any questions from board members? Any comments, any wishes to make any adjustments? Speak now.
I just want to say that Ian's point about traveling around is absolutely true. They have really stepped up that game, and I want to thank them for doing that.
And I would say too, thanks, Rob. I would say that's greatly appreciated down in the southern end of the region because we hardly see anybody anytime. So it's really good to see you and know that you're accessible to us. Okay, hearing no other questions or comments, do I hear a motion that we adopt the 3 documents related to the budget? And that's from Rob to adopt the budget documents as presented for fiscal year 25. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's a second from Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. And this will be a roll call vote, as I've just recently been reminded from Sarah. So Sarah, would you call the roll?
Yes. Okay, I'll just go through everyone, even if they weren't originally on the roll call. Dr. Aday. John Anzavino.
Yes.
Billy Beal.
Aye.
Taryn Bryce Rowland. Oh. Taryn, I don't think we heard you. But right, Taryn, if you just want to give me your we can't hear you, but if you want to give me your vote in the chat, I'll record it. Renee Daniels.
Aye.
Jackie Davis. Jan Urquhart.
Okay, without organizing.
Val Folds.
Yes.
Joel Griffin.
Aye.
Lisa Hull.
Aye.
Dr. Kennedy.
Aye.
Kim McClellan.
Aye.
Rob Cortell.
Yes.
Jeff Sapersky.
Aye.
Lindsay Watson. Linda Worrell.
Aye.
Dr. Young. Is Dr. Young still on? No, okay. Vernon Green. Can you come off mute for me?
Aye.
Thank you. Dr. Gullickson.
Aye.
All right, that is unanimous.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just for the recording, Taryn did say aye in the chat, so we're good.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is amending the Region 6 Growth and Development Plan to include agriculture as a priority industry cluster. This is not an action item. It's just a briefing by Ian and for us to consider in the near future. So Ian, would you like to brief us on that?
Yeah, and this definitely won't take 15 minutes. It'll probably take 5 at most. And really, I have it on the agenda to kind of get us. So Sarah Dunnigan mentioned that we're going to be updating our G&D plan soon, doing kind of a bigger update than we did last year. I really want to start us. We'll do some kind of back end activities offline. Sarah and I will. But I really want to get the council and us to start thinking about, our industry clusters. So now the way that they are, which there are a lot of pros and cons, but we have basically NAICS codes. So we have really broad industry clusters. I think that there are some specializations in our region. I think that there are some assets that we can leverage in the region that having those broad industry clusters can sometimes be an impediment to. I have agriculture here specifically, again, to open up the conversation, but we see a lot of movement in controlled environment agriculture in the state. Region 3 in particular has done a really good job. They actually did a report a year or two ago. It's been a while, but just there's a lot of investment in controlled environment agriculture in the state. Harvest Food Bank in our region, it kind of highlights that. But I think that there's an opportunity for that industry specifically. And I initially had this as an action item, just as agriculture, but I thought that agriculture was too broad. So I wanted to pull that back, and Sarah and I will do some analysis, looking at location quotients, looking at jobs EQ data, and the next time we come back to you all, we'll have some actual data. We'll share this with you beforehand, and like I said, we'll try to send out some surveys and stuff to get input from the council. But I think at the very least, I think adding agriculture makes sense. Kind of specifying that is what Sarah and I will figure out as staff and provide a recommendation to you over time. But similar to aquaculture, it's a historical industry. There's a lot of overlap. So we have some projects in aquaculture that we could potentially book, or in agriculture that we could potentially book as aquaculture. But I think that there's an opportunity, again, don't want to harp on it. Well, actually do want to harp on it a lot. The controlled environment agriculture, I think there's an opportunity to really harness our assets to go full in on that industry or that sub industry within agriculture. And then, as we all know, agriculture, is a historical industry in both the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula. So I think that there's some entrepreneurship opportunities, especially again in controlled environment ag, but some workforce development opportunities as well. So again, just bringing it up. We can talk about it as much as you guys want to talk about it today. But we'll be doing some work on the back end and trying to provide some of that actionable data. And we'll be getting your input throughout the process as we kind of, reconsider our industry clusters, and maybe we keep them broad. Again, there is some benefit in that, but I think that, some other regions have very specific clusters, some are broad. So we just really want to feel out what that looks like, and haven't really had the opportunity to do that other than when we did the major update in 2020, 2021. So.
Thank you, Ian. Jeff Sapersky and I, as your chair and vice chair, had an opportunity to discuss this with Ian prior to this meeting, and this is very timely for our two regions. It's something which, we have a strong agricultural presence, but not a whole lot of creativity from what I know of the two regions in agriculture. And we want to stay current with and competitive with the rest of the regions in the state where some of this is now taking place. So this is real good for us, I think, and I think it'll be something which will be beneficial to these two regions here in the future. Any questions or comments or thoughts from the board members or council members at this time in conjunction with this? Okay, Ian, we'll look forward to the research that you and Sarah do and bringing it back in a little bit more refined, for a little bit more refined and open discussion. Thanks so much and thinking this. Appreciate it. Okay, next item up on the agenda is our single application for today. And we have with us Dr. Rebecca Lowry. And Ian, would you give us a quick introduction and then we'll turn it over to Dr. Lowry.
I will. So Dr. Chowry actually was part of the Stafford Public Schools project with G3, I can't talk today, G3 Community Services that we approved in 2022. So Dr. Chowry is going to be leading the new lab school in the northern part of the region. So that lab school will include locality participation from 4 out of the 5 localities in Planning District 16. So that's Caroline, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, and King George. I did not mean to say Spotsylvania, I meant to say Stafford. Spotsylvania is the only locality in Planning District 16 that's not currently participating. Orange County is actually participating from Region 9. So this project, Sarah, DHCD Sarah, in her presentation mentioned that we can have single region competitive projects now. So the idea is that this project will draw down based on the Go Virginia request, we'll draw down the rest of our per capita budget. So we'll have some return from some projects, but an estimated about $770,000 for per capita projects. So it would draw down the rest of that, and then it would pull the rest from the competitive fund. So I just want to make that clear. I know that there's, some sticker shock when we have some of these larger projects. This is a little over $3 million. So I want to make that clear that it will be pulling down from that competitive fund that currently sits at $24 million. Sarah also mentioned the recapture of 28 million from the state. So, but that currently sets it at 24 million. So, our recommendation, we worked very closely with Dr. Chowry and the team with Covexa as well. Covexa is really kind of providing the expertise from the AI perspective. This is an industry that I can't speak to intelligently, but it is definitely, a focus of the current administration. I think will be an important part of workforce going forward. And I think that this really kind of sets us apart as a region, but also as a state. You don't see a lot of states pushing forward an agenda related to AI workforce that much. The superintendent of Stafford Public Schools has actually been speaking in conjunction with Covexa, National Superintendents Association. So we felt like this was kind of a timely application. So Rebecca, I hope I teed you up, but I'll let you take it from there.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate the feedback we have gotten through this process, and we have really tried to incorporate it as we've continued to refine and build out in more depth what we are looking at doing. So just a brief recap for those of you, I know several of you have been able to chat with around the development of the Academy of Technology and Innovation at the University of Mary Washington, or ATI as we're calling it shorthand. As Ian mentioned, we are one of just a handful of approved college partnership lab schools at the state level. Actually, our counterparts at Germanna Community College with their Teachers for Tomorrow Academy, and our program focused around the reciprocal relationship of computer and data science. We became the second and third approvals in the state on the same day. Our program is, as Ian noted, it's serving high school students from 5 school divisions initially, and he's already listed those off for you, so I won't repeat it. I did put this graphic just to the right there so that you can see we are, as a program that per state law needs to be open to all students who are interested. We have mapped out 3 broad pathways that students will be able to pursue with us. One is a high school diploma, where they are also looking at adding industry certifications. The second is a high school diploma, where they're also looking at adding industry certifications and possibly some college level coursework. And then the third pathway that we have been working on with some team from Germanna is building out a pathway where students finish that high school diploma and also look at pursuing an associate's degree. And right now we've been working with Germanna on 2 different pathways. One would be a general studies for the universal transfer, and the other would be in computer science. So I highlighted here just a few of the many articles that are coming out on a regular basis around how AI is really going to revolutionize and impact the economy. And just the both the costs and in salaries right now for people that have these skills and these large language models and kind of data skills that are needed to build out AI. That's kind of the Wall Street Journal article that is linked there, as well as some of the emerging research. I just pulled up an article, well, actually an early working paper for more of a peer-reviewed piece from the University of Pennsylvania, looking at jobs that will also be going away possibly as a result of AI. And so there really is going to be a need to rapidly mobilize, I believe, as a region to both reskill current workforce and then prepare both the emerging and near emerging workforce of that kind of 18 to 25 and then high school student age group. And so what I can look at here is in this project, we've really looked at those three broad strands, right? So we're looking at equipping the current workforce, and there's kind of three buckets in that piece. One is that that partnership with COVEXA and AASA around AI policy development and professional learning for kind of senior level school division leadership, because this is something that in the K-12 sector, you're really having to rapidly think through how to adapt to this. Also working on educators' capacity to respond to and identify opportunities connected to AI development. So the day-to-day classroom educator and how they adapt in their classroom. And then we're also looking through partnership with Code VA in this project at providing opportunities for educators across the region to add their computer science endorsement. We believe it is going to be critical for more educators, particularly at the secondary level, that regardless of what their main content area is that they are teaching, that they are fluent and able to adapt to those computer science skills in their curriculum. That's something we're really looking at modeling at ATI UMW, where you might have a history certification that's also partnered with a computer science, or your traditional lab sciences partnered with computer science. So as we move on to looking in the next slide on the emerging workforce, one of the things that is probably the highest, Ian mentioned the sticker shock that is part of this project, right? And that is very true, right? And that's part of why I linked specifically some of those Wall Street Journal articles that speak to just the cost around AI pilots right now. One of the strands of this work that we're looking at with the emerging workforce is building out some AI pilots that are responsive to region needs and pilot how this can be done in a way that is helpful to the community and not in a negative way. So really doing it with intentionality. And then also creating internship and job shadowing opportunities for current college students from Germanna, from Rappahannock Community College, and from UMW or other adjacent sectors where they will get to see what that is looking like. There may be some credentials embedded in some of those internships as well as we look at those college level student credential pieces. And then there will be some sessions they can participate in backwards design, AI fundamentals, and entrepreneurship directly through COVEXA, and then continuing to work on that teacher preparation that is aligned to the economy so that we have teachers not only prepared for the pedagogy needs of their students, but also who are very much staying in touch with what's going on with the regional, national, and global economy so that they are much more equipped to prepare that next generation workforce. And so finally, on the next slide, we're looking at that near emerging workforce, which is your high school age students, right? So for the students coming to ATI over the next few years, we're looking at starting with approximately 85 students from across the region next year. They will, as part of their overarching high school coursework, they will also be getting exposure with these COVEXA industry experts and others to fundamentals in AI and backwards design and entrepreneurship, really looking at supporting them and pursuing that CompTIA IT fundamentals offering, which is being redesigned as we speak and will launch next year with the inclusion of an AI component. And then the creation of personalized learning pathways for these students to help them connect to their career goals. That's something we have in our state contract, that every student will have one. And then in their sophomore year, there's an element partnering with Riot and revising the way students participate in personal finance and economics, which is a required graduation, but embedding in that a K-12 version of Riot's accelerator program, which we believe is going to produce a much higher quality workforce as these students graduate and emerge. Also continuing to work with students on adding additional CompTIA certifications, particularly looking at their Program Plus, which we think is aligned with some of these innovation and entrepreneurship programming they are going to do, as well as what will come out in year 2 of this program, which is a CompTIA AI certification, and then continuing to refine that pathway. Finally, in their junior year, that is when students will have the opportunity to start that dual enrollment associate's degree pathways, which they will be taking coursework directly through Germanna. We've also been including UMW team in that discussion so that we're having really robust conversations around that K-12 community college 4-year university continuum. And making sure we have the best possible opportunities for transfer. And then throughout that, you'll see at the bottom, we will be looking at these interdisciplinary mini capstones that will provide students those hands-on real-world application of all the learning that they are doing through credentials and traditional high school coursework. So as we move on to the following slide, just in summary, that's really what we're looking at doing is trying to rapidly poise the region to respond and not, quite frankly, be behind the curve of something that is, most of us have had conversations around the fact that this is this generation's internet, right? And maybe even more powerful in the way that it shapes the economy. And so there is certainly a reason for caution, but there is also reason to be ensuring that we are poising the regional economy to rapidly respond. And looking over those sectors, I think as we've talked about kind of in this meeting about generation of new sectors, I think this may position the region to be in that position to be able to really be a leader in the region and across the state. And then I also think you're looking at just the ability to have a workforce in all of the priority sectors that's able to respond and adapt to this, I think will support the region's overarching economic development efforts.
Okay, Dr. Towery, thank you very much, and I apologize for mispronouncing your last name. I was working on
it happens all the time. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. So we've had the presentation from Dr. Towery and a brief presentation from Ian. I know there have going to be some questions and comments, particularly from some of the members of the council. Do we hear any at this time?
Sir, I have one. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I apologize for not joining you immediately, but I had another appointment that I couldn't reschedule. Dr. Towery, I'm not familiar with partnership agreements with Rappahannock and Germanna. Perhaps you could help us with that, because as far as I know, we have no agreements around dual enrollment.
No, so
Dr.
Gullickson, I meet with Dr. Earnhardt and Ms. Lance. We have a standing meeting. So we've met twice so far and mapped out draft agreements. And then I have a standing meeting with Dr. Earnhardt, Ms. Lance, Ms. Burnett, and Dr. Gray that we've now set up for monthly just to keep momentum going. We're obviously 2 years out from when students would start DE pathways. So that is noted as in that planning stages piece, but we've mapped out two kind of sorry, I was reading the note there. So we've been in that process of, we've got two kind of draft pieces mapped out there, and then we are working on meeting monthly for refinement of those.
Yeah, I guess, and I can't speak for Dr. Kennedy, but I would like more detail on that before this has moved forward. We, of course, Dr. Kennedy and I are responsible for the dual enrollment credits in this region. So we want to just be really clear on what's being offered. So I don't know the mechanisms of this council, but I'm wondering if we could just hold until those are in place, or at least I have reviewed them. I don't know if that's appropriate. I just don't know. I'm new.
And I would add, is that all right, John, if I speak?
Yes.
I would add RCC is not mentioned, but we are the dual enrollment provider for King George County. So I'm a little uncomfortable too, because this is kind of being blindsided.
Okay. Are we speaking about delaying approval of the application until these agreements are in place? Is that what I'm hearing from Rappahannock and Germanna?
Yeah, well, since we're not mentioned, we don't know anything about it at RCC, and we do serve King George County for dual enrollment.
Okay. Ian?
And we haven't seen the proposed grant either, as far as I know. So I'm just a little uncomfortable at this point, because obviously we're responsible for the quality of the dual enrollment, and without having that conversation with Rappahannock or Germanna, it's just, I feel uncomfortable.
Okay, well, I certainly appreciate that. Dr. Towery, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, the one thing I was just going to provide some context on there is I tried to provide the goal of creating dual enrollment pathways as part of what we're working on in terms of overarching context, but it is not necessarily part of this grant application as a whole. So I was trying to provide that background information of the meetings we have had with Germanna and UMW team to start mapping out those pathways and doing those pieces in place. But it was not intended to be conveyed as a specific element of this grant proposal in particular, because it is very much the case that, right, those are in process types of things. And I know with Dr. Kennedy, I had some conversations with her and her team very, 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 very early, but not we have not kind of connected back in some time around that those pieces. So, and that was one of the things we did talk about, is that King George element when we met a number of months ago. So I did just want to provide that clarification, because I was trying to provide overarching context around goals and scope of ATI as a whole, but that's not necessarily part of this grant proposal in particular.
So I misunderstood then. I thought dual enrollment was part of this grant proposal, as well as internships with Germanna. Maybe I misunderstood.
So the internships we are looking at offering for college age students, and our goal would be to in the good faith effort of partnering with all kind of college age entities around the region, make sure that we are trying to make those available to students from all of the higher ed institutions in the area.
So just help me. I just need to be clear on this. So there is no dual enrollment proposed in this grant?
The dual enrollment that we are working on mapping out wouldn't start until after students, the students wouldn't start it until their junior year, and this is a 2-year grant proposal. So it's providing overarching context to overarching efforts of what we're working on building out at ATI, but it is not yet at the, it would be beyond the scope of this grant window. Does that make sense? No, I'm seeing a face that says it does not make sense. So
so are you saying that at the end of this, we would envision having implemented new dual enrollment programs? So let's say
yes,
the ends in 2 years. At 2.5 years, we will have implemented that based on the partnerships built through the project that are already burgeoning now.
Yes.
Okay, and essentially there's not a commitment to dual enrollment in the current application, but we're working towards that. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so Dr. Gullickson, how do you
Yeah.
feel about that?
Well, I'm just wondering what the outcomes are of the grant. And maybe this is just my bad. I should have read the grant ahead of time. I think that might be helpful if you just bring those up.
So we are looking at reskilling. Let me pull up my Gantt chart here. We are looking at reskilling a number of educators through both kind of the AASA partnership and senior level leadership, as well as approximately 40 to 50 current educators and supporting them and adding their computer science endorsement. That is one of our goals at ATI UMW in general, and as part of our state contract, is to really work to support both the educators at ATI, but in the effort of serving to foster the development of educators across the region, we would be looking at supporting students with current educators with adding kind of critical need endorsement areas at the secondary level. And so that one of those is computer science. Another of those not related to this grant, but adjacent is English ESOL certifications and special education certifications.
So this is
Sorry,
only.
I stopped on the first thing. So we're also
Okay.
looking at approximately 227 credentials. About 177 of those would be with high school students and include both CompTIA as well as some other industry adjacent credentials, potentially for students struggling with the CompTIA, as well as looking to support some of those college level students who might apply for those internships and might be interested in adding credentials as well. And then there's the internship creation that we would make available to kind of the target age range would be that emerging workforce age range of approximately 18 to 25. That would include both shadowing the AI pilots. The AI pilots would be another element that would be an outcome of this. And then, so the AI pilot internship, as well as internship potential opportunities in kind of the innovation labs we'd be building out at ATI UMW.
Okay.
And can I see the budget, please, again?
The match would be on the next page. So for everyone that has their packets put up, the budget's on page 68 of this packet. I can
You can
resend
just
if
keep
anyone
it-
needs it.
Yeah. And so the match primarily most of the match is local match, which is one of the qualifiers for the match waiver request, which is part of the application. It's also generally a requirement for a one region competitive application to be reviewed favorably by the state. So most of the match comes from the localities. And then there's additional match from COVEXA and AASA, the National Superintendents Association.
We've got a couple of board council member questions. First, Renee, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I wanted to let you know, we are having a leadership change at Spotsylvania County Public Schools. We should be having a new superintendent on board July 1 is our goal. And so I'm wondering when that individual comes on board, would they want to have the opportunity to look at this grant and be added in, and if that's a possibility?
That's a good question. Ian, this needs to stay in the scheduling with the state board and their approval. This needs to move on today or it gets delayed to a later meeting. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so would there be an opportunity to amend the grant afterwards or for Spotsylvania to join in after they have a new superintendent? I would think that there would be. That would maybe lessen the impact on the other communities and also increase the impact of what the outcomes are. Would that probably not be the case?
I agree with that. I would yield to Dr. Chowry on the participation in the lab school though.
So, as many of you know, Spotsylvania was included in the original planning grant for ATI UMW, and they did decide under the previous administration not to participate in the end. But we have, with the good faith effort that we do believe opening up this opportunity to as many students as possible, we have kind of intentionally tried to set aside a certain number of seats every year that should Spotsylvania, I get emails from Spotsylvania residents on a somewhat regular basis asking about this as an opportunity for their students and for the community. So we have chosen to open our doors with closer to 85 instead of 100 seats so that we are kind of still setting aside a portion of the original seats should Spotsylvania choose to participate at a later time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Towery. Have another question or comment from Kim McClellan. Kim?
Yeah, thank you, John. So as one of the initial reviewers on this, I just wanted to give my perspective. So congratulations to Dr. Towery for getting so much information in such a short time. I know it wasn't that long ago we did this review call, but I remain uncomfortable with this grant request. I know that the number is really large and it seems to me very much an education program, not a Go Virginia program. And I'm still struggling with that. We're only talking about freshmen right now. There are not juniors and seniors in this school. It's going to be a long time before we see this output into the community. And I just, I'm really struggling to find my way to yes on this one because of just, it feels like it's just inappropriate for me for this grant vehicle, at least the way that it is now. There's just so much on education, on delivering a policy. That's just, to me, that is not what we do. And I'm not there yet. And, when we talk about bringing our per capita money down to, correct me if I'm wrong, but bring it down to, I don't know, zero, close to zero. What is the grant window on this? If we're looking just 2 or 4 years out, I mean, we're still talking about, barely 18-year-olds. I'm just, I struggle significantly with this one. I'm sorry. I think it's so cool and it'd be great to say we were cutting edge on AI, but it doesn't feel like it's come together for me yet.
Thank you, Kim. We appreciate that. And is that the committee report or are you as an individual council member?
So Jeff Sapersky and I did the initial review as the 2 council members who give initial review and feedback.
Okay.
John, and maybe it's pertinent to open it up to them next and then have other folks pose questions, but Lisa and Val reviewed the application as well the second time around.
Okay. Well, let's hear from the committee members. What your thoughts are in regard to the discussion to date and where we are on this.
Yeah, John, Jeff here. Kim and I did the initial review, and I think a lot of our comments related to trying to get it to more of a job creation. And I think a lot of the questions that have come out of here are probably a byproduct of the doubt that we put into the initial grant request to try to strengthen it to make it more of a job creation rather than an educational grant. So I share some of Kim's that. I'm probably not as, I think it could still fit in. I understand the community college reservations. I don't know if we wanted to move forward, if it's even viable, or even if we do votes with a subject to approvals, subject to some conditions to get approved. So I'm with Kim. I think it's a really exciting, it's a great project. It's just slotting it into a jobs creation when the yield is 3 to 4 years out. I might need a little more clarification from Ian on how that matches with what the state board's looking for Does that make sense?
It does. Do other committee members have some comments they'd like to add to the discussion? Val?
Yes, this is Val, and I wondered if we could get a quick walkthrough of the private sector workplace needs currently, just to give me a sense of what's existing today in the private sector for these students. And it may make me just a little bit more comfortable if I could get a sampling from Dr. if she could share with us what current private sector needs are. If these students were ready to go out today in our region, for example.
So I think one of the things, a lot of this data right now is still kind of at a global level, but I know the Forbes article I linked kind of talked to, I think they used, actually pulled some of them up so I'd have it ready to go. So that Forbes article I linked in there said it's predicted that 97 million jobs involving AI will be created between 2022 and 2025. I think one of the biggest things that I'm looking at in this project is not just the new jobs coming out of it, but part of why we added, kind of based off of the initial reviews feedback, and emphasis on reskilling of workforce and kind of that emerging workforce with the college student internship creation and the and I should say college age student, the internship creation, and then the kind of additional with the credentials is around the fact that not only is there going to be AI, I think it's a matter of whether we are poised as a community to be ready to fill some of those AI professional gaps, or whether we as a region do not position ourselves to respond to that. I also think this is likely going to be the type of rapid fire technology change where if you are not prepared for it as an existing or near emerging workforce, there are going to be challenges as the economy just keeps forging ahead. And so I think it's well stated, both the kind of, we've all seen kind of the rapid shift in automation of factory production, right? And the fact that not so long ago, there were well-paying, high-paying jobs in factory industry that as that has been automated and moved along, the logistics management piece with the I-95 corridor and the port expansion in Virginia, I really see AI being key there. One of the things I was reading in the University of Pennsylvania article is, and this one's really adjacent to the education workforce in particular, but it's also adjacent to healthcare, et cetera, translations, right? I know in the K-12 space, we never can find enough translators, particularly for languages that we may struggle to have translators available for. And some of the new language model AI pieces is going to really revolutionize the ability to have on-demand translation that's much better than the current Google Translate, that even though it's been refined over the last several years, is still pretty easy to spot a Google Translate versus an actual translator. And so I think you're going to see those shifts starting to happen. And so I think much like, I remember when the recession of 2007 happened, there were, as someone who is married to a civil engineer, right? At that time, there were still a number of civil engineers who did hand drawings. And the people who I saw get laid off in the recession of 2007 that struggled to ever get hired again were the people who had not made those jumps and were prepared for that shift in the technology that had happened. And so I think similarly, I think there's just some value in being proactive as a region and thinking through how to reskill current workforce, support that emerging workforce, and then I do hear Kim's concerns around kind of next year's freshmen, but I guess my counter to that is that if we don't start to equip tomorrow's workforce now and really invest in that, I do worry that it will be too late on some level by the time they get to more of a true 18-year-old emerging workforce and are ready to contribute.
Thank you, Dr. Towery. Vernon Green's had his hand up for a while. Vernon, would you like to contribute, please?
Thank you so much, sir. As just joining the board today, I was very hesitant to say anything, but what I will say from an industry perspective is just, I guess, parallel what Dr. Towery is saying. This is one of those things where we're either moving towards it, getting ready, preparing for the jobs that are coming. I sat in a meeting this week that outlined very specifically just how many entry-level data teller, just how many positions were going to be replaced by AI over the next, it started last year, and over the next 5 to 6 years. I do believe that this is something that may touch on education, but it's definitely workforce development and workforce preparation for jobs that we don't even know are coming yet. And getting them some level of general understanding, some level of entry-level access and experience in these areas, I think benefits us as a workforce environment. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Vernon. Any other comments from committee members who reviewed the application? Okay. Ian, if you would, have you had discussions with DHCD staff about this application?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. So we shared this application with our counterparts at DHCD some time ago. And basically what you see in the application is the feedback that we got from DHCD staff. I'd say one of the things I know that we're talking about job creation. There's job creation and there are also jobs filled. I think this may live in kind of a gray area of filled, and then to Vernon's point and Dr. Towery's point, jobs created that we don't know about yet. And I'm trying to couch this in a way that's diplomatic, and really I guess the crux of it is that, and this was part of the JLARC study, an emphasis on credentials as well as job creation. So as Sarah Dunnigan mentioned, the job creation is not like the only eligibility requirement. So the credential piece here can be somewhat used as approximate for the job creation piece. I will say also, this application, all applications, has an ROI calculation that is in the application materials. For competitive projects, we have that validated by an economist at George Mason University. So that analysis of job creation, just specifically, again, kind of taking out less of an emphasis on the credential piece, is in the application materials as well.
And those are both negative, are they not correct? The returns on investment?
Dr. Towery, I'll let you speak to the most recent, basically Terry Clower's confirmation of the ROI analysis that was in the initial application.
So we did receive two different versions of the ROI analysis. The one of them we received was a positive ROI. The second one was a negative ROI, and it really came down to estimates around job salaries. The second one that Dr. Clowers used much lower starting salaries or salaries as proxies. I will be honest, I was a little surprised at how much they were lowered. I think they were lowered to approximately 60 to 70,000, which, given what I know about teacher salaries, surprised me a little bit. Just around where so much of the tech salary scales are right now. I do think this one is a challenge because as we've kind of highlighted here in several pieces, while we know there are some kind of massively high paying jobs in this field, it's also a little bit of there's some degree of unknown, right? And so you're trying to kind of guesstimate how quickly some of these skills move from crazy high bonus packages, that Wall Street Journal that's talking about $1 million just bonus packages, much less salaries, right? I don't see the salary staying that high as more people develop these skill sets, right? There's a supply and demand piece going on right now. But at the same time, I also anticipate that what is going to increasingly happen is those high salaried tech sector positions are going to need to include some of these skill sets. And so that's kind of where that piece is. I also think, and this does speak to some of what's been brought up. This is focused much more on long-term career preparation and workforce development, and ultimately hope business creation and development in the region. But that does lower the ROI because it is not, while we have intentionally made sure to add a component or add a couple components, both focused around reskilling existing workforce and working with kind of that 18 to 25 year target around build out of internships that would be hosted. There is an element of this that is in the longer term piece, and with the current way that ROI is calculated, it does lower those overarching numbers.
Okay, thank you. Any other board members have questions or wish to comment?
Linda, did you want to say something? I think we're unable to hear you.
Yes, I would like to ask a couple questions. Thank you. I can't get my hand to work.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the sources and uses of funds, and there's a number there for $2.2 million. And it says the lead on it is facilities improvement, salaries, marketing, technology. I'm curious about how much of that is hard cost, how much of that is the equipment and preparing the facility, and is that at a University of Mary Washington building? That's one of my questions.
Are you talking about in the leverage?
I'm looking. I don't know what I'm not sure what page I'm looking at, but it looks like the sources of funds. It says facility improvements, salaries, marketing, technology, safety, security, 2.2 million.
So that is in the leverage section of this. So this is not part of the ask of Go Virginia, but it is acknowledging the 2.2 in startup funds that ATI was awarded for the overarching ATI UMW project. It is a UMW facility that we will be hosted at, and as we are looking at having both a more K-12 group in the building on a day-to-day basis. We are looking at some safety and security improvements to the building. We also kind of much like the there's also a desire to be building out some innovation lab space that I hope in the long-term vision of the school itself will be useful in supporting. I met with economic development team from Stafford last week to kind of share out and just get some initial thoughts around ways to leverage the space as a potential incubator. And I think this grant proposal would be a great jump start on that through some of the AI pilot build out, but One of the goals, I've seen this in visits down to Danville and some of what they've
How
built.
much, I'm just curious about the money. Can you just tell me of that? Can you tell me, I want to know how much of this money is ours as opposed to the bigger state pot? I'm kind of curious about that. How much of it is going to be improvements to Mary Washington, the university? I would like to know if do we have at least time for Dr. Kennedy and Dr. Gullickson to get comfortable with this? I mean, can we close that? Can we close this out before the end of June by having one more call just to give them the opportunity to get comfortable? It's just a lot of money, and it just seems like there are some loose ends that I don't understand and I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. And there was a question in there actually, John, but I know that I put 3 or 4 of them together. So those are the things I'm interested in of this money. And I think you might have told us that at the very beginning, Ian, of the money that's the state money for the bigger projects that are more than one region, but how much of this comes out of our budget?
Sure. So this would exhaust. Again, we'll have to see. We have some projects that are returning money that their
Right.
fiscal goes out.
It'll wipe us out, right?
Already happened, but yeah, so that this would take our about 770 to 780,000
Okay.
Per capita budget for this
Okay.
fiscal year, which would be replenished on July 1st.
Okay. So thank you for that. Again, I wish we could slow it down just a little bit and get a little bit more specificity on it, get a level of comfort for Dr. Kennedy and Dr. Gullickson. It's just a little bit, to me, it feels a little bit unfinished, I guess is my point.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Those are good comments. And, Dr. Towery, what happens if this program, if Go Virginia doesn't fund or provide the resources that you need in this application? I noted in the application that you already signed up your first cohort. Does it slow the program down? What are the impacts?
So I think the impacts is we are not going to be doing a lot of this AI development work, right? So we're still going to be working to provide high schoolers with a high quality education. This project allows us to build capacity at a much quicker rate than we would in and of ourselves, quite frankly. So right, the DE pathways, we're still going to be working to try and build out DE pathways with Sherman and Rappahannock, as I kind of noted earlier. That's not, I do think there was some misunderstanding that this was specifically part of this. Now, I think part of this holistic work is to continue to work to try and build those out as a potential mutually beneficial thing to have in place. But so we would continue to try and work towards those opportunities being available. We would continue to, we would not, obviously we would not be able to kind of host some of the reskilling and policy development work for local school divisions. We would not be building out AI pilots and hosting those from the school or providing college student internships. Those would be things that we definitely would not have capacity for without bringing in some of these additional resources financially and in terms of subject matter experts in some of these areas. We probably would significantly scale back the CS endorsement additions to Dr. Kennedy. Yes, the lab school was approved on the same day as Germanna's lab school. So it was they were the number 2 and number 3 respectively. And so there, so those would be some of the things, right? I'd still probably be looking for my starting team of teachers within ATI UMW to look at possibly getting CS certifications, but we probably would not be serving as a broader host to the region educators and getting those CS endorsements added. So those, I mean, I could do a kind of full breakdown of that, but it would essentially, it would be a a slower build out of systems level capacity if the project is not funded. So I think what we would likely be able to do and get jump started in 1 to 2 to then spilling over to 3 to 4 years of the school would probably be pushed out to closer to 5 to 6. And some of it wouldn't happen, right? Like I'm not going to be able to shell out in and of myself for AI pilot development, right? Like that's going to be far beyond the scope of what we could do as part of this. So I hope that provides a little bit of context.
Thank you very much. Ian, question for you. We have a waiver request for the match on this. Is that correct as part of the application?
We do. So it would reduce the match from 1-to-1 to 2-to-1.
Yeah. How often are those submitted to the state board? Do you know?
I mean, they have been, and they have been approved. The match waiver, I don't have a specific number, but the match waiver request is something that's kind of new, so there's not a lot of history. It was, I think, approved last summer. And I will also just say that, you know, as Sarah Jonigan mentioned, next fiscal year, the match for Go Virginia will go back to 2-to-1.
Okay, well, we've heard a number of concerns expressed by council members today.
I believe Lisa has her hand up. I apologize.
I'm sorry. Oh, yes, there you are, Lisa. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't see that.
No worries. Sorry about the late question, but when you talk about teacher improvements, what about educator improvements or professional development opportunities for teachers at the community colleges? And kind of a secondary question for Dr. Gullickson and Dr. Kennedy, is that desirable? I mean, are teachers there looking to upskill to AI credentials, and would that be part of this grant as well?
Well, I'll address that first. I was doing the math on this. I think we could scholarship over 340 students full ride 2 years on this amount of money in an AI and data science experience, computer science. So it's just a lot of money. We are right now paying for our faculty to be upskilled. So yes, we would be interested, and thanks for asking the question. The only thing that I see as an advantage to this grant is the possibility to train and educate K-12 teachers. I think that's a real advantage. All this other money, I don't quite understand the use of it, and the ROI was mentioned earlier. But I thank you, Lisa, for saying that, because I do think everyone needs to know AI, and our faculty would certainly benefit, but we're already doing a fair amount of that ourselves, but we could always do more. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. And like our faculty are all going to a specific AI training for higher ed professionals. So, I mean, she's right. It's going to be ubiquitous, and it's going to be something we all need. But and I agree, it's the high school faculty that need to be trained, because if we are going to do anything dual enrollment, they have to meet our level of certification in order for it to be dual enrollment. So I have a little bit of a concern about that.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your comments. Lisa, did that get your question answered?
Yes, it did, because I was thinking about the DE part, that they have to be to that level in order to teach DE in the high schools.
Okay. Well, this is and Ian mentioned this in our prior conversation Jeff and I had with him last week. This is a rather large and complex application, and probably one of the most complex ones that Go Virginia Region 6 has reviewed ever. Is that correct, Ian, you think?
It is definitely one of the largest we've had in most complex, for sure.
Well, what I'm hearing is, as your chair, is that there are a number of unanswered questions and concerns in conjunction with this. AI, it's here, and it's coming, and it's growing, and the impact and dealing with it for all of us is going to be something we have to deal with. However, what I'm hearing from the board, the council members, is that this may not quite be ready to go, and there are a number of questions have not been answered in conjunction with the application, that there are concerns from other council members that this may not be the best use of all of our funds. Do we have an opportunity, Ian, in your mind, to answer those questions, refer this to the executive committee for approval, as we've done with other applications, when those questions are answered? Or is this something that is just, with the deadlines that we're facing, beyond reach?
So before I answer that, and I know that we're running way over time, can I pose one question to Dr. Towery to just, and then I'll answer those questions, and then at your all's pleasure, we can move forward with whatever you want to do.
Go ahead.
Dr. Towery, could you just kind of talk to, we've talked about this in the development of the application, but for the benefit of the board, can you talk about, so for instance, the contract services, the $1,315,440, the design and delivery of AI pilots. Can you kind of talk about some of those bigger budget line items?
Yes, so that is kind of what I was getting at in terms of building out some actual AI pilots through this work that could potentially turn into something broader. But there would be, and you can kind of see that in the description a little bit, and it kind of, again, it alludes to some of the it is one of the highest budget cost categories of this, right? Because it is so expensive right now to do some of this work. And so the hope is that these would be built out in a way that could potentially launch into businesses. We didn't cite that directly just because, you know, IP can be sticky. And so we didn't want to promise something that we may or may not be able to deliver on, but that would be some of what we'd be working towards. And then there's also part of that would be to support with, that would be leveraged for then creating additional opportunities for those emerging workforce elements to be supported, to be supported in that through those internship creation and working to find ways to build on the training you do in traditional coursework through really doing some robust shadowing and internships that we hope would really shift the way the workforce comes out in the area.
Thank you. John, so to your questions, we would basically have to call, like, for lack of a better word, emergency executive committee meeting to push up the timeline of that. If we kept our traditional meeting date now, we would be outside of this quarter's application timeline. And then that would, so that would put us back to our July meeting and a September state board meeting.
I have a question for DHCD staff on that about the application getting pushed back. Since this would deplete our per capita funding for FY24 and then go into this competitive fund, if it's pushed to a July council date and then a September state board date, would it then deplete our re-up of a little over $1 million and then go into the competitive fund? Or how would that work, Billy?
Oh, I can try this, Sarah. We don't know yet. I mean, that's the short answer. But it would not touch your FY25. Now, if you funded it out of your FY25 and any remaining carryover balance, then it could potentially exhaust, again, your FY25 resources.
That was my question, yeah.
If it exceeded your available fund balance at any point, then we would, if it was successful and approved by the state board, draw that from the statewide competitive fund, which similarly will be replenished for FY25. We, again, pending final budget decisions.
So if this is pushed off to FY25, our council approving it, it could then deplete our FY25. Whereas if they approve it in FY24, it won't go into FY25 per capita funding. Is that correct? Does that, if this is deferred by our council and isn't approved until July by our council?
Right. So we will have to accommodate two movements of money. One is a carryover allowance, which that you guys would not be impacted. This is going to, in any scenario I run, the recapture is going to affect whether you guys fund this project out of this balance or not. There's going to be some sort of impact, right? So, I mean, we could talk offline. I would encourage you not to rush a project until it's ready, because I will just tell you based on my review and staff's review, we have similar questions. And we've also contacted Secretary Gadara with the Department of Education, because that secretariat is really leading the lab school movement. And we want to make sure that, that, you know, resources are being placed appropriately. So that's a response to your question, Sarah. On June 30th, the way the budget language is constructed now, we have got to do the recapture. Ian mentioned we do have some fund balances in the statewide competitive fund. I don't know what the board's preference is going to be on how to distribute, if you will, the recapture, but I would say any region that has FY24 funds unobligated would be at some level of risk for bearing a portion of the recapture calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I add something?
Yes, Billy, go ahead.
Real quick, and I know this application was originally contemplating to be positioned as a multi-region competitive project. So that would be, in that scenario, if this had been a multi-region competitive project, you wouldn't be touching your per capita. So just keep that in mind. This is the way it's structured now. It's a single region competitive, which means you have to obligate all your funds first before you get access to the competitive. So keep that in mind. If we're talking about timing and if there's an opportunity to bring in another region, you know, we're not telling you to go one way or the other, but there are different scenarios.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you very much. So there's hope of not depleting our funds on a multi-regional basis. I think what I'm hearing as chair, and y'all can step in and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we think there's a little bit more work needed on this application, and that we don't want to rush into approving something just to meet deadlines for state funding. The program will go on, not as aggressively if we don't approve this, but I think there's merits to this because AI is coming. It's here. It's growing in intensity as far as needs go. And it would be great, given our position as a region in the state, if we could get an application in that would really begin to train younger folks, help them learn about the basics of AI, and then bring them through the system as is proposed. But what I'm hearing is we've got more work to do, particularly with our community colleges and with the dual enrollment program proposed. So those are my thoughts. I would entertain a motion from any of the council members concerning moving this forward, deferring it, or rejecting it at this time, because I think we've just about fully discussed this. So what are the wishes of the council? Pretty quiet out there.
Hey, John, this is Jeff. I'm sort of with Kim. I would love to find a way to get to yes, but I think it falls into the defer category in my mind for the time being. As much as I hate to say that, I think there are enough loose ends that we need to.
Is that the same as table?
Yes.
I'll second Jeff's motion.
Okay.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor from Jeff Sapersky with a second from Billy Beal to table this, to work on it some more and bring forward a more complete application answering the questions of the council members. With that, this is a roll call vote. Sarah, would you call the roll?
Yes.
Unless there's that, excuse me, unless there's any further discussion. Hearing none, Sarah, would you call the roll?
Dr. Derek Aday, John Anzavino,
Aye.
William Beal,
Aye.
Taryn Bryce Rowland. I still can't hear you, Taryn. Just send me a chat and I'll let everybody know. Renee Daniels,
Aye.
Jackie Davis, Jan Urquhart, Val Folds,
Aye.
Joel Griffin,
Aye.
Lisa Hull,
Aye.
Dr. Shannon Kennedy,
Aye.
Kim McClellan,
Aye.
Rob Cortell, Jeff Sapersky,
Aye.
Lindsay Watson, Linda Worrell,
Aye.
Dr. Kimberly Young,
Abstain, given the relationship of UMW and ATI.
Vernon Green Jr.,
Aye.
and Dr. Janet Gullickson.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous to table until our next council meeting, defer.
Okay, so in the interim, Ian, we probably need to chat a little bit further and talk to Dr. Towery about how we can strengthen this and improve it to answer all the questions that have been raised today. Because as I said, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a good program, but we've got too many questions which are unanswered at this time. So it is deferred. Okay. Do we have time, Ian, to revisit this FOIA training, or do we want to push that back to our next meeting?
Yeah, it's not time sensitive. We can push it back. That's totally fine. And I can send you guys just some information as well via email. So it's fine.
Okay. Okay. So we're at the end of the agenda with the exception of information items. Ian, would you like to brief us very quickly on the information items?
Yeah, I mean, only thing I'll say, so I'll skip the March State Board update. I think Sarah's presentation at the beginning really got at most of what I would have spoken about there. I'll just say you'll see here the projects that we currently have funded. All of those are on schedule. A lot of those projects will be closing out before the end of this fiscal year. Some are already closed out. In terms of pipeline, we basically have 3 projects right now. So we've been working with King William County on a site development project for their Commerce Park. We were gonna bring that to the council this round, but needed to figure out some things, including locality participation, how to kind of make the case that that's a regionally significant site. Basically the idea for that site though is to do some due diligence and then do a direct transition into an implementation project that would include some sewage improvements on the site. I think that we'll likely see some other Middle Peninsula localities involved in that project. The other project is a commercial kitchen in Northern Neck. That's another project. We've been talking with them for quite some time, going back to last fall. Similar to the King William Commerce Park, we pushed that out because there were some questions that they needed to answer. So we'll likely see that come back. Blue catfish. So we've been talking about doing an ECB grant, just kind of understand what the market is for blue catfish, given the state's interest in kind of putting its weight behind or enabling folks, particularly in the coastal zone management areas, localities, to build an economy around blue catfish. And then final thing, and when I go through these, we have a lot of projects in the pipeline. These are really just the ones we feel like are going to come up to the council in the next 2 periods. The West Point site, Sarah Dunningham mentioned that in her presentation, but we funded that in 2022. That is the big site on the south side. The land is on the south side of the Middle Peninsula Regional Airport. We did some due diligence on that site to tier it up to a tier 3. That is wrapping up, and based on that report, I would foresee us potentially doing an implementation project that would include some hard infrastructure improvements to that site. Have a few other projects, but those really are kind of the core right now. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Ian. That concludes our agenda for today. Do any council members wish to bring up anything else for the good of the council?
John, I don't know the answer to this, but are there any council members that this is their last council meeting?
Oh, good point. I don't know the answer to that either. Sarah, she's shaking her head no.
No,
Okay.
there's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Well, thank you all very much. Rather long, but very informative council meeting. We continue to do the good business of economic development in Region 6, and we appreciate your participation. At this time, I'll adjourn the meeting. So thank you all very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.